Oh, recording in progress, ready to go. Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you. I'm going to introduce myself once more. I'm Dan Gannon. I'm the recruitment chair with NLC New Hampshire. That's New Leaders Council. And we are a progressive organization that's working to develop young leaders and proximate leaders who are doing excellent things in their community from around the state here in New Hampshire, but we're also a nonpartisan national organization with chapters all over the country. So today we're going to talk specifically about applying for the New Hampshire chapter, but there's also some really great national material out there too. If you want to check that out, I will remember to send that in my next email to anybody who wants it. So today we've got some excellent speakers who I'm going to let present themselves, introduce themselves, just to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and maybe one fun fact about yourself. And what you do doesn't have to be your job. It can be a passion too, if that's something that you'd rather do. I'm gonna switch over to gallery view so I can see everybody. Awesome. And I am gonna peer pressure our co-director, Sierra, if you wanna kick us off.
Yep. Hi, I'm Sierra Lucy. I am the NLC New Hampshire chapter co-director along with Rachel Cole. I use she, her pronouns, and sometimes I forget to talk about what my job in real life is because I just get going talking about NLC. So I'll just quickly say that I work in higher education. I'm an academic advisor and adjunct faculty member at Southern New Hampshire University. But here at NLC, I am kind of in charge of the whole chapter between the institute, the managing the board, who are all volunteers and amazing. And a fun fact is that in the summer, I like to paddleboard, take a lot of vacation time and be out in the sun and the water. And I don't know if I missed any questions because I kind of forgot. Okay, great.
You got it.
Popcorn to Jess.
Thanks, Erin. And Jess Caldwell, she, hers. I am a 2020 NLC New Hampshire fellow. And so in the real world, I am also at Southern New Hampshire University in higher ed. I work on the advising team. And the fun fact about me is my first concert ever was in 7th grade in Memorial Auditorium in Burlington, seeing Weird Al Yankovic. That's my fun fact. And I'll popcorn it over to Samaya.
Wow, that's a really fun fact. My name is Somaya Kashi, she, her pronouns. I am an artist and art educator. So if I'm not teaching, I'm creating, and actually you're in my studio as we speak. So what else about me? I'm heavily involved in a lot of racial justice work here in Concord, whether it's in the Department of Education, whether it's at the our art education chapter, gosh, all sorts of different places in Concord School District. So I have my tentacles, I feel like, everywhere. But I'm also a NLC 2020 alumni, and it's really exciting to be here. So thanks for having me. And
Awesome.
Fiona.
Fiona, why don't you give yourself a quick intro as well, even though you're not a panelist today, because you have a special role.
I do have a special role.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Fiona McEnany. I am the alumni chair, also class of 2020, she, hers. I am a molecular and cellular biology PhD student at Dartmouth, and fun fact, I'm a really serious mountain runner.
I forgot my fun fact.
I feel like you had some
Sorry.
fun.
So my fun fact is I got $5,000 off of YouTube for like a 30-second video. So, and had like my 15 minutes of fame on Amazon, like it was on the Yahoo front page, and it was on television over a silly, ridiculous video. So yeah, fun fact.
Wait, so Maya, was it the goat? Am I thinking of the right thing?
It's a praying mantis.
That's it. I know goat is nowhere close, but I feel like I remember learning about this the first weekend.
I would like to know more about about to copy this later, so we'll talk because some YouTube money.
I have a souped up mountain bike. Thanks.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, I'm so thrilled to have all of you here today, and Jocelyn and Doug, thank you so much as attendees. I have a dog who's playing with a bone in the background, so hopefully it doesn't become too distracting or I'll have to get up and move him really quickly. But we have an awesome panel set up today just to really talk about this comprehensive experience that everybody here at NLC has. And I also happen to be an educator, so you have an educator heavy panel today for folks to talk about their experiences. But we have such a diverse group of folks who are going to be participating in NLC for the class of 2022. We do every single year, almost every industry is represented in One Quick Life. So even though this is an education heavy panel, I assure you, if you come to other sessions, you'll hear from all different folks as well. So I'm going to kick it off and ask the panelists their very first question, other than their intro, which is, can each of you take a moment just to think about where you were in life when you chose to apply for NLC, and what you were thinking you might be interested in both gaining from the Institute and fellowship, and also maybe something that prompted you to be interested in applying. There's a lot in there to unpack, but feel free to take a moment and we can elaborate.
I can start. So for me, it was 2 or 3 years ago. And at that point in my life, I was an art educator and artist and was not in any shape or form in politics in any way. Had you told me this is where I'd be in a few years, I would have shocked myself. Anyhow, at the time, I just was doing my work, coming home. That was what it was. And then I had a really tough year. I had a lot of microaggression at work that had built up, and unfortunately from other educators in my building. And so that sort of built up and spilled out, like where I couldn't just ignore it, even though I've dealt with it my whole life. And it prompted me to do a really large art installation in downtown Concord, as in response to what I was feeling at the time. And somebody from NLC approached me in the middle of that project and says, hey, do you want to join? And your work is very politically heavy. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. No. And so I was skeptical. I won't lie. I was really, really skeptical at the time because I'd never heard of NLC before. Again, not politically at all in any shape or form in any scene. And once I got in, my whole life is completely transformed. I am now involved in so many different aspects, and I try to amplify voices of those who are minorities like myself. So that's kind of a very shortened version of how I got to be here today. But I definitely, everything that's going on right now was a trajectory that happened from when I began with NLC. So.
Thanks, Samaya. Sierra or Jess, feel free to take it away.
I can go. So I did NLC in 2018. I forgot to say that in the beginning. And when I applied, I guess so the application process would have been like 2017. So I was just really starting to volunteer for different organizations. I was really mad about the previous year's election. I'd been involved in things in the past, but I think at that point I was just like, all right, I need to really kick it up a notch. So at the time I was volunteering for Planned Parenthood and became like a volunteer team lead for that organization, and just kind of started to like meet people who were involved in different things. And that's how I found out about NLC, which I think really interested me because I was happy in my job. Like I'm still in the same job now. And I had, good friends, like everything was kind of in place, except for I was missing this like one thing. And I think that it was just like my own larger purpose. So going through NLC really changed my life. After the institute itself ended, I really started connecting with the folks who had been in my cohort. They're all my best friends now. Like, I don't actually know how I survived without them before. They're all amazing. They all do incredible things in their own ways all around the state. And I joined the board right after I finished NLC. First, I was a mentorship co-chair. So I was matching fellows with mentors throughout their institute experience. And then after that year, I became the chapter director, which I'll just share briefly, has been a super transformational experience for me because I have a leadership opportunity that I haven't necessarily like taken on in my day-to-day work life, but I still have that opportunity and I still get to get that experience. And more than that, I have been able to meet the coolest people all around the country who also care about the same things that I do. And it's really interesting because we get to know the other chapter directors from the other 49 chapters really well. So now I have friends who do this work all around the country, and that's really cool. And I'm very much connected to them and talk to them all the time. So between, our just being super involved here in our local chapter, I also have the extension of the NLC family nationally. So that's been really cool too.
So I work with Sierra and others who were part of NLC in prior years as well. And honestly, I think it was watching how being a part of this organization changed their life. It all of a sudden was like, ooh, this is exciting stuff that people are a part of. And selfishly, I wanted to be a part of it as well. That combined with the political climate in 2019 made me go, I have to do something more other than, rage, scream every other day. So I thought, how do I put myself into action? And so I applied. I did not think I would get in. And when I read the bios of everyone in the 2020 fellow, I was like, I had such imposter syndrome. So I say that only because believe that you are capable and worthy of this. And when I joined, I would say that it expanded my lens so much into the lives of BIPOC. I have a close-knit group of friends, and my network includes diversity that wasn't really racial and ethnic diversity. And so I was missing that perspective and lens, and I got to be at the table with people who had so many different experiences that I got to hear and listen and learn from. And it ignited even bigger of a fire because now you're at a table with others that you can learn from experiences that you've never really been at the table with before. And it also gave me so much hope in a time where I felt like I was devoid of hope for what our country was going through, is currently still going through. And so to be with 20 plus other professionals who are passionate about furthering a progressive agenda, not only in the state of New Hampshire, but being able to make that beyond the state borders to make a more equitable life for everyone in this country was like what I also needed. A community where you knew that people were passionate about similar things. And it made me go, okay, we could make change. Like, change is possible. And I found a group of people that made me feel like that was possible. So I think I will say my mindset when I applied was a little hopeless for this, just the trajectory of where things were going politically. And then I felt really hopeful once I sat in a room with these amazing people and hearing the work they were doing outside of NLC, what their goals were to get out of NLC. And it was just really powerful. And I'm so grateful for the experience.
Thank you, everyone. I hope again that the puppy doesn't become too distracting for everyone. I love those responses. There were some, Doug and Jocelyn, I think one of the things that really comes out of these conversations is that a lot of folks come into NLC with a wide array of interests. Those are both professional and personal, but something that I think is incredibly high impact is there's this common theme that seems to unite a lot of the fellows, which is that folks are really interested in making a positive impact in their own lens, whether that is something at work or something in the community where they see a gap that they want to address. But there's also this huge opportunity to learn from one another, not just from the fellowship where there are skills that you'll develop, and we'll talk about that, but also from one another. I know, Jess and Samaya had the benefit of being in each other's cohort, and I'm sure that they have learned a lot from one another. Sierra said that, her cohort has represented some of her best friends today. And, I can say I was a 2019 fellow, and I can say that the people who were in my cohort, I learned more from than, in that 6-month time frame than I did about myself, my identity, and, how to take up space as a successful progressive leader in the ways that I wanted to, than I had in years prior. So it's a really awesome way to form this powerful, powerful network. And just learned how to be a badass. I love it. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I have a couple of other questions, obviously, so I'm gonna plow through, although I could probably stick and just pick your brains on each of those for a while. Since you all had this opportunity to grow, Samaya said it was life-changing. Jess said that, she grew substantially and saw change in, the people who she saw go through it before her. Sierra indicated similar things. I'd love to hear if there was anything in the Institute specifically. So I'll go more into detail for this for folks about what the Institute and our fellowship actually look like in a few minutes. But is there anything in the Institute where you're learning about these leadership skills that you felt like was a particularly important lesson that you learned? And maybe it was positive, maybe it was challenging for you, but it helped you to expand. Was any particular lesson or weekend that was meaningful?
I think I'll start. I think for me, the first weekend, and I know Dan said we'll go over the structure, but the first weekend is really spent not only getting to know your fellows, but really actually getting to know yourself. There is so much reflection required in that first weekend. It's really emotionally exhausting in maybe the best way possible. I think I can only speak for myself, but it's rare that I sit down and think about what I want to achieve personally and professionally and put those things on like pen to paper and think, okay, what are my short-term goals? What are my long-term goals? And that was so invaluable because the goals, we took the time to think about, okay, what are my passions? What are my values? And what are the things that I do? And are there gaps there? Are there things that I'm passionate about or things that I have values, strong values about that don't get the box ticked by the things I do every day? And if that's the case, what are things that I can do to make sure that I find space and make space for that in my life to make sure that that becomes something that is fulfilling to me? So, and that was so powerful and incredibly valuable. And I will say this, one of my, in 5 years, I want to be was back in Vermont, and I accomplished that last year. So I am joining you from Vermont, and it was really lovely to reflect and think, okay, you know what? I don't think this was happenstance. I made a goal for myself, and I saw it happen, and there's something really powerful about that. So the first weekend for me was really outstanding.
I'm going to repeat a little bit of exactly what Jess is saying. That first weekend, all the goals I had put in place that weekend actually all happened. because there was a financial aspect that I wanted to like do some financial cleanup, and I did it. Like I moved out of where I was living. I'm in Concord. It's unbelievable how many, if I look back and think of all the goals I had, I actually checkmarked majority of them, if not all of them. So that was one thing. A few other things that I've used throughout. There was this whole thing on how to stand up in public speaking aspect. I reflect on that anytime I have to do public speaking. And there's been a few other things I'm trying to remember. The public speaking one really stood out for me because I have used it multiple times. Oh, God, what else was there? There was a lot. There's so much. PR stuff, because I've had to use that as well. There have been many things that I've like, oh, I have that somewhere in my stash of knowledge. Let me pull that. And and to go back, my biggest takeaway for me, and it's just meeting all the other people and knowing that my voice can have an impact. And I did not have that before. I didn't know that I could really make a difference. And it's amazing how one individual can really make a change. Like you can do a lot more than you think you can do. And that's the biggest lesson I got out of NLC.
Well, all of what everyone has said so far is how I feel. And also I have a couple of other things I can add. So I think the biggest thing, which is more of an overarching theme, is that NLC gave me the encouragement of just the reminder that anything that you can do with your own privilege to lift somebody else up who doesn't have that privilege is something that you need to be thinking about and doing every single day. So for me, it's like friends and community members who are BIPOC, LGBTQ, women, non-binary folks, like those are the people we want to see in leadership positions and in every space. And like, what can I as a white woman do? And how can I, when I have a platform, hand it over to somebody who does not get the same or have the same privilege as me? And calling people out when they don't do that, or asking them to, because I think that it's super important to be able to confidently say like, no, this is not your space right now. Like, I'm going to give it to somebody else. And I think the biggest thing is not only remembering that, but having the confidence to be able to stand up and say that when it might not be popular, or when maybe it's your friend and you're a little bit nervous about what they might think about you saying that in that moment, and just kind of not caring, or knowing that like what you're saying is more important than the aftermath of what, you know, your anxiety later of like, oh gosh, what did I do? Who did I make upset? Like that doesn't matter. So for me, it was gaining that confidence. And the other thing that's a little bit more of like a tangible skill was fundraising, which is something that Dan will talk about in a little bit more detail later. I hadn't had very much experience in fundraising at all, aside from maybe like making some calls for organizations I volunteered for and stuff like that. But NLC, and like I said, I'll let Dan go into more detail. I have a very hard time not talking too much about it because have just been so into it the last couple of years. But when I was a fellow, I really learned the fundraising skills, put them to use by being like a lead on our chapter fundraiser that year. And then from then on out, ended up taking over the chapter fundraiser and just being the point person for that for the last few years. And I think going back to like the confidence piece of it, being able to just own that, throw it on my resume, it now says, you know, in charge of a statewide chapter fundraising $30,000 annually plus annually. So it's like, those are things that it's just an example of, if you want to learn a skill. And I was never like, I'm going to go do NLC to learn fundraising, but it was just something in that moment that I was like, you know what, I can be a leader in this space. I don't know how to fundraise really, but I'm going to learn. I have to learn anyway, so I might as well be a leader and help other people learn. And just kind of like took the opportunity to gain that skill. And I've really been working on it the last few years, and it's definitely challenging, but it's something that makes me proud looking back for sure.
Thank you, Sharon and Samaya and Jess. Those were all fantastic responses. I'll just touch on, I think that what everybody shared is really, really important. And I had mentioned, and, Fiona could certainly speak to this just as well, is that we do all have different experiences because we come to these from different places in life. So while, some people are really, really well equipped to discuss issues of DEI, or somebody might be really, really well equipped to talk about fundraising and finance and PR and campaigning. Those are all things that we have space to grow in and then collaborate with as a network. And for me, I'm not a panelist, and you'll see me at all of these events, so I don't want to take up too much space myself. But those were all really huge opportunities for me to expand in as well. And, like Jess said, you really do have to kind of reflect on what your gaps are. DEI is something I'm really passionate about, but as a white man who's raised in New Hampshire, it's not something that you have to confront on a daily basis. And so it really took, for when I applied to NLC, that was something I admittedly said that I was passionate about and didn't really know where to begin. And the DEI lead weekend, discuss more in a little bit about, was super influential. It really helped me to think about where I should be claiming space, and like Sierra said, making space for others and rising people up who might not otherwise have the opportunity to do so in the same room that I'm in. And the same thing could be said for fundraising. I am not a fundraiser by heart. I absolutely still feel nervous about it, but it gave me the skills that I needed to do to be successful. And like Sierra, and I became the fundraising chair for my cohort and was like, I'm gonna do this. And I've managed to, for the most part, I helped to lead with Sierra and all of the board members at the time, and my co-lead for the fundraiser. We really managed to have a successful year. And I still know how to do those things today. So it has been super, super influential for me as well. And everybody else has kind of discussed the longevity of the way that the Institute and the fellowship has impacted them in a really meaningful way. And I love hearing about that. And there's a few other aspects of NLC outside the fellowship that I'd love to hear you touch on. And those are the capstone project and the mentorship experience. So I'm going to start with the capstone project. I'll discuss more about what capstone means for everybody in a little while. But long story short is it's a project that you're passionate about in your area of industry, in your personal life that you really want to have a greater influence on within your community and learn more about, maybe that you haven't touched on yet. So these folks have all gone through that process and had an opportunity to grow their own capstone project through the Institute and with their cohorts. So, I think that Sierra, you have not started yet. So would you share your capstone and then popcorn around the room?
Yeah, so just capstone, not mentor.
Yeah, we'll touch on capstone afterwards.
Got it. Yeah, so when I was a fellow, I had this grand idea that has actually morphed since then, which can happen and does happen with capstone projects. So when I was a fellow, I really wanted to start a New Hampshire politics podcast. And I did start that as a project. And I think by the time I got to the end of my institute, like I had like a trailer episode and stuff like that. And I think it's something that I still might go back to, but the way that my capstone morphed was kind of into me joining the board and supporting so many other people doing their capstones. And I'm still actually working on my own, which is, I think, now, instead of being a podcast, it's going to be more focused on me and my work, and kind of putting it all together in some way, like a website perhaps, where I can kind of store everything that I do. I'm still working on it, and that's totally fine. That happens, and yeah, that's about it.
Thank you, Sharon. And you're so spot on. I mean, a lot of people's capstones morph. We'll talk about that. Thank you. Jess or Samaya, do either of you want to go next?
Sure. So what brought me to NLC was I'm an artist, was a photo project called Diversity in the 603. And what I had done with that is I had photographed Concord residents, and I had high school students interview the Concord residents, and those were turned into QR codes on top of it was like a big photograph with these QR codes, and you could see them all downtown Concord. And you could hear their stories. And long story short, with each individual story, you kind of learn where they came from, where their heritage is, and then their hopes, dreams, and fears. My point of the whole project was to show that even though our story is different, each one of us, our individual stories are so different, we all come from different places and to arrive at this one place. But our fears and hopes is what ties us all together. We all have the same fears, we all have the same hopes, and it really didn't matter what your gender preference was, whether you were 80 years old or 5. I mean, it was amazingly all the same response. And so while my students, I had prepped them for this, you could see the bell, like everything kind of turning in their head as they're watching it happen. And so that experience, I wanted to keep bringing back. And so I joined Kimball Jenkins School of Art. I'm on their programming committee. And that was basically I wanted to create more moments like that. So I actually just, I'm in the middle of finishing it up, but I just did one recently at Queen City Pride, and I photographed individual at a photo booth, just like the other one before. And this one, I gave each person a board that says "I am," and I asked them to label themselves however they want. And in that process, it was really fascinating. And I wish I could record the process of them deciding what they're going to write. Because some people were like, I am happy, I am human, I am alive, which I thought was pretty profound considering the year we had. But there were some really magical moments that happened, and I want to recreate. That's my whole goal, is to kind of recreate those moments. So while we have an end result photograph, it's the process that's really has the most meaning. So I'm going to just have to summarize because this just happened a couple weeks ago and I'm still kind of sitting on it, but I had, sorry. Yeah, I found out. Sorry. So I had a mother and a kid, and the kid's probably in their early 20s, show up at my booth, and the mom kind of stepped aside, and the kid came up and looked. And I'm sorry, kid, I don't know how to state, I don't remember whether it was a male, female, non-binary, so I'm just going to go with person. This person came up. Anyhow, and stared at that board for like 5 minutes. And I was like, you know, what message do you want to give to the world? Everybody's constantly labeling you, putting you in a box. How do you want to present yourself? And you can see just the wheels turning. And after about 10 minutes, they wrote, I am finally happy. And the mom started breaking down, like started sobbing. And there was this whole moment where the mother and the person were like hugging, and it was like this 10-minute long hug thing happened. And you could tell there was some really amazing story behind all of that. So that's the sort of work that NLC has. Yeah, I know, I cried the entire time. My husband and I brought my kids to see it as well. We cried for pretty much 6 hours straight, but there was a lot of that kind of moments. I actually had a couple propose at my booth. So it was really special, I do have to say. I've had a lot of really, yeah. And so anyhow, that's the sort of work I want to continue doing. So initially when I did diversity in 603, it came from a place of sadness, anger about things that had happened to me. And then that experience, and then with added NLC's confidence boosting, it's pushed me to continue to work and create more of those opportunities where I can amplify voices. And I don't know, anyhow. That was my projects to create more of those moments, and I did, and I'm continuously. So it's never ending for me. It's not one project done, I'm over. Now I can go back and do. It's going to be a forever thing.
Thank you, Samaya.
Samaya's art is so powerful. It makes me cry, and I haven't even seen it. So, what my capstone was. So I love to bake. And I make a damn fine whoopie pie. And I also feel passionately about abortion rights and Planned Parenthood. So my capstone was, I'm going to make whoopie pies and sell them alongside at Planned Parenthood fundraisers. And this is in 2020. And then the pandemic hit. And then I had a baby and nothing happened. None of it happened. And that's okay. So what I decided to do instead was, in my role at work, really thinking about how do I drive a DEI initiative forward to make it really impactful for many. So I presented a proposal to our AVPs of a series that I was like, we need to mandate this. Like, we mandate IT security trainings, we should mandate diversity trainings, like, full stop. If we care about it, let's baseline it, talk the same language, and then we can go from there. But we have 800 staff that we could impact right now, and they're craving it. And leadership doing nothing speaks more than if we actually do something. So, like, let's do something. And it wasn't resistance. They were like, great. I think that they just, I think, had no idea where to start. So I was like, screw it, we're going to do this. So heads up to Sierra, who I work with, and we will get this rolling, and it will be done ideally by end of October, where the staff will have gone through it. And then the goal is to present it to other departments so that they can also leverage this DEI training, because I'm just such a big believer, if that is something that you tout as a value as an organization, then you have to do work and you have to mandate it. And I don't care what people I upset by learning about, systemic oppression. Like, we're going to learn about it. And if you get upset about it, maybe find somewhere that you're not going to be upset, or learn and grow. That's the ideal. But we know that if you don't like it, you can find somewhere that's not going to be real about the systems in the world today. So that is what my capstone really turned into. So it went from whoopie pies, which now is just a fun edible hobby, and now it's trying to drive some DEI work to make sure that our staff feel that we are putting our money essentially where our mouth is.
Thank you so much, all of you. I could probably have cried at each of those projects. I want to just be being cognizant of time. I want to hear from each of you very briefly, if you can, about your, thank you, Fiona. I want to hear very briefly about your mentor. So who was your mentor, and what did that go like? And if you could do it like in 30 seconds to a minute, that would be perfect. And I know Samaya and Jess, you had a kind of unique experience because you were paired later. So it's fine to talk about whatever that looked like for you.
So I just got paired recently, but we did, the Queen City Pride came out of that mentorship. So it's just starting, my mentorship with the other artists. So And that was just a few weeks ago, so only a couple weeks ago. So it's all fresh. But so I'm at the beginning of that whole mentorship process, but I'm really excited about it. And if what came out of that was this project, hey, like I'm looking forward to future interactions. So yeah, I mean, the goal is to broaden your horizon, to have somebody kind of push you to the next, and that's exactly what my mentor's doing. So yeah, and they're awesome.
Can go. My mentor is Deborah Altschiller. She's a state representative here in New Hampshire. I specifically asked for her because when I did NLC, I didn't personally know, like I knew I was starting to kind of like get the feel of like who people were in like New Hampshire politics or just influential people in the progressive spaces. I specifically asked for her because I knew that she was a badass legislator in the state house and that she stood up for abortion rights and gosh, who knows, so many different things, and it could talk about it for way more than 30 seconds. So, but she's been awesome. She's somebody that we met a couple of times at that point, and she's somebody I reach out to like when I need something, basically. She's always there though, for me if I do need something.
My mentor, I have interacted with a couple of times via email. Dan connected me with actually someone who chartered the Vermont chapter of NLC, and he has connections to Planned Parenthood, and I'm excited to work with him further. We got connected right around though when Charles and I started looking for a house here, and then we moved, and it just turned into some chaos, and it has fallen off of my radar. The great thing though is that I feel like because of the nature in which we were introduced to it, was like, hey, let me know when you need me or want to connect. I have no doubt that I can reach out to him and start the conversation, because my other goal is to actually start a version of Seacoast Sing Off in Burlington or Middlebury, Vermont, because I feel like that will be, I can't think of a community that would embrace that more. You have great breweries, you have a very progressive state, obviously with pockets of problems. So I'm not naive to that, but that is something that I want to work with him on, to get connected to people that we can make that happen, because that was such a fun event and I will miss it greatly knowing that I'm not in New Hampshire anymore. So I want to bring a slice of that to the state of Vermont.
Awesome. Thank you so much, all three of you. And Jess, I will just say that if we do have a Seacoast Sing Off, I think that you have plenty of guest rooms where you could stay for the night to compete. This is a Parenthood fundraiser that Ciaran was really influential in organizing a couple of years ago, and did it for a few years. And Jess won 2 years in a row. Yeah, so Jess has a great singing voice. So we have a lot of artistic folks in the room today. All right, so I had mentioned to be mindful of time. I want to be able to give Doug and Jocelyn my briefest spiel about NLC. And, I've had the benefit of talking with Doug. So Doug, this may not be new news to you. And Jocelyn, I know that you know Aaron, so it probably isn't news to you either. But I want to make sure, for the sake of this recording, and in case there are any gaps in your knowledge, that you really understand what the life cycle from applying to NLC through the Institute and life after kind of looks like. So you've got those bookends. So application time is right now, right up until September 3rd. So you still have plenty of time to submit. We're obviously really hoping that, okay, perfect. That's totally fine, Smaya. We're obviously hoping that folks can submit their application sooner rather than later, but you do have time to think about it, to talk to me about the time commitment, to ask any questions that you might have. But that's the deadline. And then the application itself does not actually take all that much time to complete. I would set aside like an hour and a half, but it's something that you can even step away from and come back to, and that's not a problem. A lot of the questions are really reflective about who you think you are as a progressive here in New Hampshire, across quite a broad spectrum of what progressive means. And then, what you think that you might have to gain by joining as a part of the new Leaders Council if you're accepted, and also what you might have to contribute, because we're trying to put together a cohort of folks who can learn from one another, as well as then, you know, build this strong progressive network here in New Hampshire. And then once September 3rd rolls around, those deadlines close, and we have about a month and a half where the board, they all review, and a bunch of our alumni all review the applications that have come in, and we have interviews for folks, and then typically are able to let folks know by late October whether or not we are able to offer them a seat to join the 2022 cohort. We accept 15 to 25-ish folks per year, but we try to keep it relatively small and tight, and make sure, again, that it's a productive sized group where we can challenge and learn and expand with one another. But that's around the size cohort that we have each year. And you then need to let folks know whether or not you want to participate if a seat is offered to you by early November. You have a little bit of time to think about that. It's not something that you need to feel a rush on, but we try and make sure that we make that decision relatively quickly. The Institute doesn't begin until January. So there is, you know, some wiggle room there to work. And if you're accepted, and I want to make sure that, you know, this is covered right up front, we have a pay it forward model. So the training for NLC is worth around $1,700 because we bring in all these professionals, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. You don't have to pay for any of that aside from a $200 fully refundable deposit that you put down once you accept that seat. And as long as you successfully complete the Institute, you can get that back at the end. You know, it usually comes back, Sierra, correct me if I'm wrong, it's like mid-June. Once everybody is success, maybe a little bit later. It takes
Really like mid-July.
Okay, thank you. So you can get that all back, or you can choose to, if you've had a positive experience at NLC, donate it, because the fundraiser is this pay it forward model, as I'd mentioned, and the class of 2021 fundraised to make that model accessible to everybody here. If for any reason the application fee or that deposit are financial barriers to you, let me know. We do have workarounds for folks. We never want money to be a barrier for entry to candidates, but you know, those are the general expectations. Then the Institute begins for the cohort in January, and each month there's a 1 weekend commitment. It's a pretty full weekend. You know, when we're in person, which we may or may not be in 2022. Right now, we're kind of planning for this virtual world to continue. That's what we did in 2021, and it was a really powerful experience. It's also what Jess and Samaya kind of mostly went through when they were in the pandemic world, you know, and it was really, you know, hitting us hard. They had to pivot in the middle of their experience towards that. But this year was entirely virtual, and it was really successful. And there were some real advantages, but we're not quite sure what will be happening in 2022. Planning for virtual, there may be some in-person components. That will be something that our national organization directs Sierra and her co-director, Rachel, to have more information about in the coming months. But that January weekend is the first one, and it's lead weekend, which is that DEI weekend that Jess and Samaya and Sierra and I all kind of said was an incredibly powerful, reflective weekend where you learn about your own self, you think about your goals, where you fit in as a progressive here in New Hampshire and in the country, how your identity has shaped your experiences, and then, you know, some opportunities for you to have to learn. And then you share that also with your cohort. So you have a level playing field where you all know this pretty intensive and important information about each other. And it's an incredible bonding experience, as well as an incredibly reflective and important experience to have for yourself that really kind of brings the cohort together in a meaningful way. From there, each weekend successively thinks about different themes. So there is a theme on marketing and PR. There is one on public speaking and communications. There's one on campaigning, whether that is for public office or for elected officials or for you know, legislative issues that you really care about and want to be able to promote as an ideological campaign. And then there's community campaigning too. So maybe you want to run for school board, or maybe you want to figure out how to effectively campaign to like get you know, local food pantries to have greater access to resources. There's a lot of, you know, smaller town issues and community issues that you can bring forth as well. You'll learn how to do all of that. And then there's ones on fundraising and finance, again, that are broadly applicable. And there's a couple of other ones too, where you focus on specific community issues that apply here in New Hampshire that are really important for the progressive community, but also reflect the interests of the cohort. So we tend to have ones that are focused on, education or activism around a specific legislative issue, and we'll bring in speakers from the state and the community to talk to you about those core issues as well. And the common theme that I had mentioned, about the cohort is that because people come in from all these different industry areas, while we do have a huge contingent of folks who work for the government or work for, elected campaigning and the legislative issues that they care about, we do also have this broad spectrum, Samaya being an artist educator, Jess, Sierra, and myself all being educators actually. There's clearly an educator component. There's also community grassroots activism. There's folks who are working in, corporate and social responsibility and for-profit organizations. There's nonprofit organizers and, professionals as well, really from this broad spectrum that could represent anything. So those skills, even when we're talking about campaigning, can really be applied to almost anything that you want. And we have that lens on when we go through these institute weekends too. So it's not like there will be a weekend that is not effective for you if you apply and are accepted as a fellow. Everything really has some direct applicability in a variety of different ways to your life and your interests, either in or out of work. And I really, that's not a pitch. I mean, that it's just 100% true, and I stand by that. And I see nods from the fellows, which I appreciate. The alumni, which I appreciate. I'm trying to think about other important aspects of the Fellowship Institute itself. I had mentioned the time commitment is a pretty full weekend. So it is Saturday and Sunday, full days. If we're that is likely, in Concord or potentially in Manchester, we try and things to be centrally located for folks in the state. But if it's virtual, that will be on Zoom. We have become very, very clever with making Zoom an engaging and meaningful space. So while Zoom fatigue is totally real, and I won't sugarcoat it and say that you won't experience that on some weekends, we do a lot to make sure that we're sensitive to people's needs. There are lots of engaging activities that our curriculum chairs who facilitate these weekends do to make sure that you're not, bored and just staring at a screen. You're really being actively engaged in the work and in the learning and in the conversation. The other thing that's really neat about the virtual weekends that will continue, I'm sure, whether or not we do have in-person components, is that we have been able to engage with our national organization in a way that we never were able to when we were entirely in person and New Hampshire focused. So while at least half the weekend is always New Hampshire focused on these specific issues and our specific cohort, there is also now this national component where you can connect with chapters from all over the country to talk about some of these issues and how maybe New Hampshire is experiencing things differently from chapters in other parts of the country, and where are those common grounds as well. So that way, like Sierra mentioned, that national network is increasingly powerful. And I don't know if that would have happened if it hadn't been for COVID. So it's definitely a silver lining to something that's been really, sad, and it's a hard thing for a lot of people, is that our national organization has come together in a really powerful way. And it's also enabled us to bring in national speakers to come in and join NLC too. So there's a lot of positives to be said for those virtual components, if that is the track that we end up keeping into 2022. I think that generally covers the main spiel of the Institute. There are a few other components that I just want to talk about as a part of your fellowship if you apply and are accepted. So we have the Fellowship Institute. We then have the mentorship component, which you've heard about. The mentorship is something that actually happens at the tail end of your fellowship. Typically, we match people with their mentors in the later months of their fellowship in like May or even June, to make sure that as you're winding down from all these skills and you've got your project in place where you really want to start thinking about these things that you're passionate about as a new alumni here at NLC, your mentor is that person who's going to be able to help you to further those goals. And we have folks, obviously, I should just say, Samaya and Jess both mentioned they were just recently paired with their mentors this year. COVID really, threw everyone for a loop for a variety of different things. So it took them a while to be paired. That's not typical. Usually we do that right after the institute's finishing up. And that was the case for our 2021 cohort and when Sierra and I went through it as well. The mentor is kind of a pick your own adventure with that person. We work to make sure that we have an effective match. So it's somebody who is in a similar line of work to the things that you want to pursue. It does not need to be the job that you are doing today or the job you want to do tomorrow. We will basically have common conversations with each of you if you're accepted, and you'll have the time to mull that over earlier in the institute to start to think about what it is that you would like to have in a mentor. And it really does span the gamut. Some people just have a couple of email exchanges with their mentor to talk about some milestones and get feedback on what it is that that mentor thinks that they might need. And some people have turned their mentors kind of effectively into their best friends. We have had folks who have had weekly meetings with their mentors for years now. Some of you may know Natalie LaFlamme. She's a lawyer in Concord, and she's also an NLC alum. She wanted to be matched with a lawyer who was at the end stage of their career to really see what the arc of being a lawyer in New Hampshire might be like. And so she was paired with somebody who was much, much older than her. And, because of that, she was able not only to get that trajectory, but they were able to offer her some job opportunities out of it. And she's done some pretty incredible things out of having this specific kind of mentor relationship. And they work together regularly still to this day. And Natalie has been an alumni for many years now. We also have folks like myself who had only a couple of interactions in person with my mentor. And then, we've had email exchanges pretty regularly, but it was exactly what I needed at the time to really start thinking about what I needed for my next steps and my professional goals. I know that I want to pair education access and equity with, my job as an education administrator today. But also meld that with some public policy work in the future. And so my mentor was able to really guide me on some actionable steps to be able to do that, because they were in a place, 10 years in advance of where I might be. And I'm working towards those goals today, which is really, really cool. And I had mentioned it's pick your own adventure. You really do get to do that. And obviously, sometimes your mentor wants a closer relationship with you, and sometimes they are only able to do certain things and to their capacity, but it's a collaborative nature of a relationship, and it's really, really positive for many folks. Another element is the capstone project, which folks mentioned. I love that Jess pivoted from whoopie pies to this major DEI initiative for her organization. It is, absolutely something that you also get to kind of do, and people have shifted a lot over the years with what it is they want to pursue for their capstone projects. Some people lock in right away, and then there's things that are small in scale to things that are really, really large and impacting either an entire organization or an entire state. And I think that they're powerful no matter what the scale is. So some folks have started, gender inclusive sports leagues. I worked to do like a short-term after school program to get students from middle schools out into farms. And it was not something that has lasted forever like Samaya's has, or Jess or Sierra's, but it was really high impact for the students that I worked with at the time. And it has given me a lot of thoughts about what I would do differently if I were to come back to that project in the future. And it's something I really hope to do when I have more personal capacity to do so. And then there are obviously folks like Jess and Samaya and Sierra who are all doing these huge statewide initiatives. One that I really like to lean into, and I'm sure that a lot of folks who are listening to this recording, and Jocelyn and Doug, you may have heard of, is the New Hampshire Reproductive Freedom Fund. That was started by a New Hampshire alumni. Her name's Josie Pinto. I talk about her all of the time because she had a really specific vision when she went into NLC. She saw a gap. New Hampshire did not have an abortion fund. She'd never lived in a state where that was a problem before. And being somebody who was really passionate about access to abortion care and to women's reproductive health, that was her goal from the get-go. But obviously that was not something that was accomplishable in just a couple of months during the Institute. So what she did was she found every single step she needed to take in order to effectively get that off the ground while she was a fellow. And then she started building a network, and that partially incorporated her mentor. It incorporated other alumni from, she happens to be a 2019 fellow with me. And so she pulled in a bunch of 2019 fellows who now serve on the board of the Reproductive Freedom Fund, as well as a bunch of other folks who have been really influential. And over the course of 2 years, she fundraised and organized and brought about this really incredibly effective program. And launching this year, she's been able to start providing abortion access to not as many patients as she would like to. You know, it's still a sustainable fundraising thing that she is being challenged to expand upon today, but she's starting to provide care to a number of clients, and it's been incredibly successful. And she has a passionate team of organizers who are working with her. I could go on and talk about a lot of these different projects, but these are just a few different examples. The last thing I want to touch on is the fundraiser. And Sierra did a great job of touching on it. I know I mentioned the fundraiser as well. A lot of people are uncomfortable with money. That's something that we as progressives need to be better about, as not just as an NLC organization, but nationwide. One of the reasons that NLC as an organization is so important is because we are one of the only leadership development organizations for the Progressive Caucus. You know, we're nonpartisan, so we do not, you know, turn down anyone. We could theoretically have Republicans coming in and joining us. That has not happened, as far as I know, but we could have people from any political party come and join NLC. What we don't have, though, is the fundraising dollars to do that as in the same capacity that the conservative movement has been doing for decades now. And so fundraising is essential to being successful in any of the political progressive ideologies that we want to promote. And yes, so Sierra noted that we're the largest national progressive training org. We've been doing it for quite some time now. And the fundraiser is a difficult challenge for a lot of folks, myself included. What you do is you spend basically an entire weekend out of one of those thematic institute weekends I was mentioning, learning about how to effectively fundraise, think about growing a network, and then you practice over the course of the remainder of the institute. And that's not just one weekend. There is an element where you are learning and working and growing with your cohort. You'll be doing Zoom calls with them. You may meet in person to do fundraising things together. But the idea is that we have this $30,000 fundraising goal that we try and hit every single year to make sure that that pay it forward model is honored, and that any excess goes to the national organization so they can help to stand up other organizations around the country and support fellow progressive development. It was something that I personally was petrified of. I still can't say again that I'm you know, like joyous when I fundraise, but it is so important to me to be able to do it effectively. And I have been able to get grants because of the skills that I developed through NLC. I have been able to, you know, call people when there are legislative issues I care about and say, can you give me $20, $50, $100 towards this cause? And it is so, so powerful to be able to have that skill. Every skill that you will gain in NLC if you apply and are accepted is powerful, but that is a really important one. And the reason I'm just harping on it a little bit now is because there are those components that exist outside of the NLC Institute weekends. All in all, it's not a huge time commitment outside of those weekends. It's a couple of hours over the course of the 5 months where you're training. And then there's usually a little bit to wrap up in June during this month where our fellows are graduating and becoming alumni. In total, though, I would say, you know, maybe 5 or 6 hours on top of the Lead Institute. And then you'll be meeting with your fellows to talk about your capstone and really make sure that you're building that network in both an organic and structured way outside of the Institute weekends. So I did my spiel. I don't know if I was as concise as I could be. I want to make sure that the rest of this time is for Doug and Jocelyn. What questions do you two have about NLC at this point? Hopefully you're thinking about applying. You know, that's my goal. That's absolutely Sierra and our goal, but I don't want to pressure you to think about that too much today. I'm really curious to hear, you know, what you're thinking about and maybe what gaps we didn't answer today for you.
That covered a lot of what I've been curious about. I like hearing that it sounds like there's a variety of ways for it to impact. You know, I'm currently a president of board of directors of a nonprofit I love, New Hampshire Teen Institute. We work with youth all over the state, and hearing Jess's story specifically has like gears turning of like, oh, would there be a chance to bridge? My future may end up being in Vermont, or is very much going to probably be in Vermont, and how much I would love, like, it's our own organization's vision to be able to grow our evidence-based and like to be a New England Teen Institute beyond like New Hampshire Teen Institute. So it just sounds like there's a lot of really amazing opportunities to like network, build those skills. Because when I think about growing our organization, I'm like, you know, if I'm in Vermont, that could be a great chance, but how do I start to get to know that community? How do we get the funding to like branch out? And it just sounds like such a wonderful opportunity. Erin has graciously extended me an invite for like several years now, and it's just never really been the right time. And now with COVID, and I'm kind of in between career choices right now, so it just sounds like a really phenomenal time to just take advantage of connecting with such strong, like compassionate individuals to like move forward productively. So that's not a question. That's more of like a, that sounds great.
I love it. I feel like that's your pitch, Jocelyn. Your pitch to the board here. I love it. I think that you touched on something that I really want. Oh, we have a new person joining us. Hold on one second. I want to just make sure that they're able to join successfully.
I don't want to gender anyone, but I wanted to be like, who is she?
It was a she. Hi, Cassie. How are you today? Hope you can hear us all right. What I wanted to touch on while Cassandra gets her audio set up was that you mentioned this network, and it is so, so powerful to have this meaningful network of folks. I'm sorry, the puppy came back. There we go. This meaningful network of young people. And the potential for that to cross state borders. I think that those are two things I didn't get a chance to speak to, and I want to. We are an older, whiter state. Oftentimes we toggle between being the oldest and whitest state, and that is difficult as a young progressive person in New Hampshire. And it is a really powerful network of alumni that you have access to once you join NLC. There are about 100 folks in New Hampshire who are alumni now. We have been a chapter since 2015. Our first full chapter was in 2017. And so we're growing constantly by each cohort that we build. And that network has been incredibly powerful. You've heard about that. But you also touched on the fact that it now transcends state borders. We have folks who are in Vermont. We have folks who have moved outside of New Hampshire all over the country now, and they're still able to tap into our national network. And we haven't gone anywhere either. So folks who are nearby, like Jess, we have the opportunity to bring them in and to have these really awesome opportunities to connect and grow and expand. I think that it's really powerful. Another, potential silver lining of COVID is that the virtual space has made that so much easier to do. And it has been really, really incredible. We had somebody last week who chimed in from Maryland, and we really do have this opportunity now to grow. So I'm glad to hear that you're here in New Hampshire today. We want folks who are, here and committed to progressive change in New Hampshire while they're here, but you do not need to be making a lifelong commitment to being here in order to join and have a really positive experience as a part of our chapter. I want to just, Doug, if you have questions, I want to give you the chance, but I also just want to say hi to Cassie. It's so nice to see you or see your Zoom box and your name here. It's great to have you join us. We were just kind of wrapping up our spiel on what NLC and the fellowship and the Institute looks like. But obviously I can connect and stay and chat with you if you've got questions. So stay tuned there and feel free to ask away. Doug, do you have any kind of questions or things that perhaps we haven't answered for you while we've got you on the phone?
Yeah, so I mean, to echo Jocelyn, like very informative. I feel like I really don't have a lot to ask that hasn't been hashed out other than kind of more minutia stuff. One thing that does occur to me is that I'm kind of like a wandering Ronin of social justice around the state and end up like filling in a lot of tasks for a lot of different groups. And it's very random and I will hear about these things. But you know, so like, I don't plan on missing things, but like, you know, these are possibilities just because like if something comes up, like the state budget, for example, I was part of the team that got arrested for, you know, to oppose it. So like, and those are things that I want to jump on if I can. Hopefully there's no more stuff that I'm like, yeah, but I can't say that that won't happen. But anyway, my question is, you know, like that juggling all these different things and time commitments, do any of y'all have experience with like what that was like and how that would pan out? You know, obviously knowing that like it's a commitment, so there's a level of stress and juggling time management, but just like, I guess some input on that would be super helpful.
Yeah.
I can provide.
Oh,
Oh,
go ahead,
sorry,
Jeff.
Dan.
No,
I
no,
was
you
just gonna say, from an alumni perspective, I can share there is an attendance expectation, and I think you're allowed to miss like 1, maybe 2 days maximum, and it's kind of a part of it is because it's such a close knit community, and you do make such a difference. Your presence there, you're sorely missed if you, and it changes the dynamic of the session. You may not think it might, but it definitely will because of who you are and what you will bring to the table and to your community. I think from a time commitment for myself, honestly, those two, the 1 weekend a month and the 2 full days was probably the largest commitment. Yes, the fundraising, that doesn't start though until about halfway and the board provides options for you to kind of pick what makes best sense for you. And I think if something came up that you were passionate about and it aligned up with like a fundraising thing, I am sure that your fundraising chair would be like, just pick a different one, right? It's about just making sure that you can make the time, and you can also make time on your own, right? If the time that the chapter sets up to fundraise, like outside of the weekend hours, doesn't work, you can find a time that works for you for those things. So I just want to share that perspective, because I don't think that outside of the weekends, I spent a ton of time on it, and really more just like reflection. So that's my own experience.
I think that's a pretty excellent explanation of the experience, Jess. Yeah, I mean, the Institute weekends can be challenging. We really try to have people understand that it's a commitment because, as I mentioned, it costs money to bring these people in and offer training. So we do take the Institute weekends attendance pretty seriously. You know, if you communicate and if there's something important to you for any kind of reason, we understand that, you know, life happens and that's, you know, something that can be negotiated with the chapter directors as long as folks are communicating that carefully. The rest of it is much more negotiable for fundraising times and for when you would meet with your mentors or plan your capstone, for example, that, you know, we expect that people will do that work, but we're not necessarily checking in on when that's being done exactly. Sierra, and I saw you come off mute. Do you want to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we don't know them at this point, but we'll have the dates for all of the Institute weekends when you, like if you apply, when you go through the selections process, we'll have them by that point. So it could be something that you would plan out well in advance, and it's just 1 weekend a month. So hopefully odds are, you know, there isn't a budget crisis at that time of year anyway. You know, fingers crossed.
Yes, absolutely. I think that was a really excellent question, Doug. Hey, Cassie, I know I don't want to put you on the spot because we've been talking now for a little while, but we're kind of winding down our hour here. Is there anything that you'd like to discuss since you've joined? Because I'd be happy to chat about that and potentially answer questions while we've got you on the phone.
Yeah, so I actually do have a question about the application. So I paid the money, that's all set, but when I went to go find the application page, I somehow lost it. I went to go do something and then I looked back and it was gone, so I didn't know like where I
Get-
could find that again. And
Yeah, I can get you taken care of. Is it just that you can't find the link to apply, or that like it's not recognizing that you've already paid and have like the application portal set? It sounds like the second one.
yeah, it just yeah, it's the second one.
Okay, perfect. So what I can't do it myself, but I can get in touch with our national organization and make sure that you get your login credentials all set. So can I ask you a favor? If you're on your computer and you just want, you obviously contact information because I have emailed you a bunch at this point. You can either email me want to privately message me here in the Zoom chat. I'll snag your email and I'll make sure that that gets taken care of in the next couple of days.
Okay.
Yeah, it's exciting to hear that you've started your application. I was telling Jocelyn and Doug here that I am, not trying to rush anybody to get it done because you have plenty of time until September 3rd to finish it. But as a self-interested recruitment chair, I'm really thrilled to hear that people are working on it already. Other than accessing the application itself, is there anything that you want to know about NLC that maybe you haven't? It's
Like,
okay.
do you guys yeah, do you guys do like when it comes to like uh legislation and stuff, is there like any things that you guys do with that? As a legislator myself, I would be more than happy to help you guys with stuff like that. And any questions that you have, I can definitely, I mean, I'm working with the legislators that put the bills in themselves, and I can always ask them any questions that you have. So
Awesome. That's fantastic. And that's actually an excellent question. So I'm going to give a brief, and I'm going to let Sierra pivot to it because she can probably give something more eloquent. The long story short is, and I've mentioned this already, I apologize if it's redundant to others. We're a nonpartisan organization. And in my opinion, and in my experience, what we do much more actively is we work to support the network of legislators and legislative issues that we individually want to help support and promote, rather than as an organization promoting specific legislation or legislative work. As a nonprofit, that's an important component. But I do think that as an individual, if you apply and are accepted, you certainly wouldn't be the only legislator who could join our ranks. We have some national Congress people who have served now that are NLC alumni, and we have quite a few New Hampshire Young Dems and progressives across the state who are serving in the House of Reps. So Sierra, please elaborate, because I know that you're more eloquent than me.
No, yeah. So this is actually something that I think we can do more of and a little bit of a better job at. I think to date, it's probably been mostly a capacity issue for those of us involved, but I know Rachel Cole, who is my co-director, and because we're lucky enough to have Rachel as such an integral part of this organization, we have close ties to the legislature now, which is nice. Not now because we had Zach Sheehan before, but I just think Rachel's really good with like that comms piece of it. I know there have been instances in the past where we have lifted up some specific bills. One that I can think of off the top of my head was something related to housing a couple of years ago that Willis Griffith, I think, was the sponsor of. He's an alumni as well. And I remember that we did put something out about that. I think we might have sent out an email to all alumni to see if they could contact their reps about that one. So that's just one example, but you're right. I don't think we've done a ton of that, and that is an area of opportunity. But Dan is also right where we are nonpartisan. So anything that we do support or kind of like put out to our alumni network. We just need to be careful that it's something that is progressive and not like, let's support these Dems or so there's like that a little bit of a fine line there where we just need to be a little bit careful. But yeah, we could definitely do more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that that's a really excellent point. Another thing that we have done, Cassie and Doug and Jocelyn, of course, too, is work to make sure that when there are legislative issues that we care about, that we utilize our network effectively. So we have an alumni network that we can message out, all of these kinds of legislative issues too. I mentioned Josie Pinto's Reproductive Freedom Fund. She has leveraged that network incredibly effectively, as has Samaya, who has shared the kinds of projects that she has done. And there are a lot of folks who are elected officials. One that comes to mind is Rep. Manny Aspitia, who's working out of Nashua. Manny has been incredibly proactive at making sure the legislative issues and causes that he cares about are advocated for, and has utilized our network to do that. So there are a lot of instances where we have done like groundswell support rather than as an organization officially have supported, but I think that would be an exciting thing to explore more effectively how to do. So could certainly be a future conversation. All right, we are kind of coming to the end of our time together here. And Cassie, if you need to stay on the phone, I don't have to go anywhere. So you and I can keep chatting, but I don't want to keep our panelists or folks any longer. So I want to just offer a very huge thanks to Samaya and Jess and Ciaran for being here to share your thoughts and your experiences and your stories, for actually making me cry. And for the laughs as well. I really do feel so grateful to each of you. It's a special thing to have you here today. And I am always a little sappy. For those of you who don't know me, our potential applicants and potential fellows here, I am a kind of a sappy person. So I love each of you, and I'm grateful to have you each here. And Doug and Jocelyn and Cassie, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure as always. And we will have different events throughout the summer. We have several planned already for July that you'll be getting communications about in the coming weeks. I hope that you can attend, because when we have different speakers, while some of the conversations and questions are the same, the experiences are so broad that you will have completely different conversations, and you'll hear these different stories just come out of the woodwork, which is really exciting. So hopefully you can attend other sessions throughout July and August to learn more. But I am also here, email, text, call, whatever it is that you'd like. If you want to talk one-on-one about NLC, that is my passion, and I'm here all summer to talk to you about it. To make sure that you feel really confident that this is a good fit for you to apply, and that you feel really prepared and equipped to submit the best application, and you know everything that you could possibly know going in. And Ciaran is here for you too, and all the rest of the board is as well. So we want to make sure that we're accessible. I'm seeing some really positive comments in the chat. So thank you all so much. I'll stay on until everybody else has hopped off. So if any of the potential applicants want to keep chatting, I'll be here. But thank you again all so much. You have a great night, and I'll pause this recording and talk to you all soon.